Some wins in NASCAR are just about crossing the line first. And then there are wins that feel like a verdict, like the sport itself just settled an argument that had been simmering for weeks. What happened at Chicagoland Speedway this past Sunday belongs firmly in that second category, and by the time you hear the full story, you'll understand exactly why garages, broadcast booths, and fan pages across the country lit up the moment the checkered flag fell. This is a story about pressure, about pride, and about a driver who decided the only response worth giving was the one written on a scoreboard. For weeks, there had been a quiet tension sitting underneath the surface of the Joe Gibbs racing camp, one that most casual fans might have missed but that anyone paying close attention to the Cup Series garage could feel building. It traced back to a single moment at the NASCAR All-Star race, a night that produced one of the most talked-about finishes of the entire season, and it all centered on two teammates who found themselves on opposite sides of a storyline neither of them probably wanted. Let's rewind to set the stage properly, because context matters here more than almost anything else. Back on May 17th, the All-Star race delivered exactly the kind of chaos and closing lap drama that NASCAR fans dream about. Chase Briscoe, piloting the number 19 Toyota for Joe Gibbs Racing, found himself locked in a fierce, wheel-to-wheel battle for the win against his own teammate, Denny Hamlin. It was hard racing, the kind that reminds you why short bursts of all-out aggression make for unforgettable television. In the end, Hamlin came out ahead, taking the checkered flag and the bragging rights that come with an all-star victory. Normally, that would be the end of it. Teammates race hard, one wins, one loses, and everybody shakes hands and moves on to the next event on the calendar. But this time, the story didn't end at the finish line. In his post-race comments, Hamlin made an observation about Briscoe that quickly took on a life of its own. He suggested that Briscoe simply wasn't operating at the level required to consistently win at the Cup Series level yet, essentially implying there was still a gap between contending for a victory and actually closing one out. Now, on its own, that kind of comment might have been brushed off as blunt honesty from a veteran who has never been shy about sharing his opinion. Hamlin has built an entire reputation around being direct, sometimes brutally so, and plenty of fans respect him precisely because he doesn't sugarcoat things. But when the comment involves your own teammate, someone driving for the same organization, wearing the same colors, chasing the same championship, it hits differently. It stops being a simple hot take and starts to feel personal. And Briscoe did take it personally. He didn't stay quiet about it either. Shortly after the dust settled from the All-Star weekend, he pushed back publicly, calling the remarks unnecessary and saying there were better, more respectful ways to handle competition between teammates. He made the point that you can absolutely win a race without trying to diminish somebody else in the process. It was a measured response, but a firm one, and it was enough to keep the story alive across NASCAR media for the following weeks. From there, the debate split the fan base almost perfectly down the middle. One side defended Hamlin, arguing that he was simply calling it as he saw it, and that elite competitors are allowed to have strong opinions about who's truly performing at a championship level. The other side felt that Hamlin had overstepped, that questioning a teammate's ability in public crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed, especially within the same race shop. Analysts weighed in. Podcasts dissected every word. Social media turned it into a full-blown storyline that refused to fade, the kind of subplot that follows a sport around for weeks after the actual headline moment has passed. Then Chicagoland happened. Sunday's race at Chicagoland Speedway was never going to be a simple, uneventful afternoon. Restarts kept coming late in the race, each one threatening to reshuffle the entire finishing order and hand the win to somebody else. That's the nature of superspeedway-style short-track racing under pressure. One mistake, one bad restart, one moment of hesitation, and the whole complexion of the race can flip in seconds. For a driver carrying the weight of a public storyline on his shoulders, that kind of chaos could easily become overwhelming. Briscoe didn't let it. Restart after restart, he held his ground. He defended the lead with the kind of composure that doesn't show up by accident. It's the product of preparation, of trust in a race team, and of a driver who has decided, whatever noise exists outside the car, that the only thing he can control is what happens between the white lines. Lap after lap, the pressure built, and lap after lap, Briscoe answered it without flinching. When the checkered flag finally waved and the number 19 car crossed the line first, the celebration that followed wasn't just the standard release of adrenaline you see after any race win. There was something heavier behind it, something that read less like excitement and more like relief mixed with vindication. Climbing out of the car in victory lane, Briscoe's emotions were written all over his face before he even picked up a microphone. And then came the moment everybody had been waiting weeks to hear. Instead of opening with the usual thank yous to his crew and sponsors, Briscoe led with a line that instantly told everyone exactly where his head was. He said, with a slight smile, that it was good to know he still belonged in the Cup Series after all. He followed it up by making it clear that the only real way to answer doubt in this sport is by winning races, and that he hoped this particular win wouldn't be the last surprise he had in store this season. He never mentioned Denny Hamlin by name. He didn't have to. Every reporter standing in that victory lane immediately connected the dots back to May, and within minutes, the moment was being replayed and dissected across every NASCAR outlet covering the race. As more questions came his way, Briscoe elaborated on why those comments from the All-Star weekend had stuck with him for so long. He explained that he's never needed extra motivation to compete hard, but that when somebody publicly questions whether you belong at this level, it's the kind of thing that stays with you. He said any competitor in that position would feel the exact same way. And honestly, that sentiment resonates with anyone who understands what it actually takes to reach the NASCAR Cup Series in the first place. This isn't a level you stumble into. Drivers spend years, sometimes their entire lives, working toward a single opportunity to compete at the top tier of stock car racing. They give up time with their families. They fight tooth and nail for sponsorship dollars in an era where funding is harder to secure than ever. They absorb disappointment after disappointment in the lower divisions, all in pursuit of one shot at NASCAR's biggest stage. So when a fellow competitor, someone respected across the entire garage, suggests publicly that you're not quite there yet, it's not something that just rolls off your back. It lingers. It sits with you through practice sessions, through media days, through every lap of every race until you finally get the chance to answer it the way that actually matters. As of Sunday evening, Denny Hamlin had not issued any public response to Briscoe's victory lane comments. That silence alone has added an entirely new layer of intrigue to the story, because if there's one thing the NASCAR world has learned about Hamlin over the years, it's that he rarely stays quiet for long. He's one of the most outspoken figures in the sport, never afraid to share an opinion, challenge a rival, or lean into a bit of psychological gamesmanship if he thinks it'll give him an edge. Sometimes that fearless honesty fuels legendary rivalries that fans talk about for years. Other times, it creates exactly the kind of awkward, lingering tension that we just watched play out between two teammates at the same organization. This time, though, it appears Briscoe found the response that actually works. Not a war of words on social media. Not a tit-for-tat exchange in post-race interviews. Just performance, delivered under pressure, on the one stage where opinions don't matter, only results do. Beyond the personal rivalry angle, there's a bigger picture worth talking about here, because this win could end up being one of the most important moments of Briscoe's entire season. A Chicagoland victory doesn't just make headlines, it strengthens his playoff positioning significantly and sends a clear message to the rest of the field that he needs to be taken seriously as a weekly threat heading into the postseason. For a driver who has flashed real speed and real potential since arriving in the Cup Series, this is the kind of result that validates everything people have believed about his talent, that when the pieces come together, he's fully capable of running with NASCAR's elite. If Hamlin's comments back in May were ever intended as motivation, as a psychological push meant to light a fire under his teammate, it's difficult to look at how this story unfolded and not see them working in exactly that way, even if that wasn't the original intention. Briscoe's own words summed it up about as clean as it gets. You don't answer criticism through social media, you answer it in victory lane. But step back from the rivalry entirely for a second, because there's something bigger happening here about who Chase Briscoe is as a competitor. For years now, people around the sport have talked about his raw speed, his aggressive racing style, and the untapped potential everyone agrees he has. But talent by itself has never been enough to win consistently at NASCAR's highest level. The drivers who separate themselves from the pack are the ones who can handle pressure without cracking, who can absorb outside noise and use it as fuel instead of letting it become a distraction, and who can deliver exactly when the stakes are at their absolute highest. That's precisely what we watched happen at Chicagoland. Briscoe didn't spend the past several weeks trying to win an argument in the media. He didn't let the storyline consume his focus or turn into a distraction inside the shop. Instead, he kept his head down, kept working with his team, and waited for the moment where he could actually answer the noise the only way that truly counts. And when that moment arrived, under real pressure, with real stakes, he delivered. That's why this particular win carries more weight than a typical regular season victory. Yes, it adds valuable points heading toward the playoffs. Yes, it strengthens his position in the standings. But maybe even more important than any of that, it hands the entire number 19 team something you can't manufacture through strategy alone: confidence. There's a noticeably different energy inside a race shop after a win like this. Crew members walk a little taller. Every strategic call during a race weekend becomes just a little easier to trust, because the team has already proven, under real pressure, that they can beat the very best cars in the field. Momentum is a real and measurable force in this sport, and sometimes a single victory is enough to completely shift the trajectory of an entire season. That should be a warning sign for the rest of the Cup Series garage. If Briscoe and his team have genuinely found their rhythm heading into the back half of the schedule, they have the potential to become one of the most dangerous, hardest-to-beat groups once the playoffs actually begin. As for Hamlin, the entire NASCAR world will be watching closely to see how or if he responds. Given his track record, staying silent for an extended period seems unlikely. He's built an entire career around speaking his mind honestly, even when it stirs up controversy, and plenty of fans genuinely appreciate that he's one of the few drivers willing to say exactly what he's thinking without filtering it for public approval. Others feel he occasionally pushes that honesty a step too far. Either way, whatever he says next, whether he offers a gracious congratulations, doubles down on his original comments, or simply lets the whole storyline quietly fade away, it's guaranteed to draw plenty of attention across the NASCAR world. Right now, nobody knows exactly how Hamlin will handle it. What we do know is that moments like this are exactly why NASCAR keeps pulling fans back in, weekend after weekend. It's rarely just about lap times or finishing positions. It's about the human stories layered underneath the competition, the rivalries, the redemption arcs, the drivers fighting to prove, once and for all, that they truly belong among the best in the sport. And if you're Chase Briscoe, it's hard to imagine writing a better chapter than this one. After weeks of hearing his own ability publicly questioned, he stood in victory lane with a trophy in his hands and let his performance do all the talking, louder than any headline or hot take ever could. We'll have to wait and see exactly how this story continues to develop over the coming race weekends, but one thing is already crystal clear after Chicagoland. Chase Briscoe didn't just win a race on Sunday. He sent a message to every driver in that garage, and to every fan watching at home, that confidence in this sport isn't given, and it isn't talked into existence. It's earned, lap after lap, on the racetrack, when the pressure is at its highest and there's nowhere left to hide. Thank you so much for watching, and for sticking with this story all the way through. We'll see you next time.